Well, we bought this farm 10 years ago. It was not a viable farm, but we didn't buy it for being a viable farm. It had been journeys are a great thing. You start out with one step and you don't know which direction that journey's going to take you. But sometimes in life you have to come to a situation where you think it's time for change. I was the first 47 years of my life in a family farm, 15, 20 miles from here, a 2,000-acre hill farm. I was the eldest son, but I won't bore you with the details. There was too many people in the family business, and a lot of people weren't towing their weight, let's say. I had a young family coming on, and I thought, I could see 50 approaching ever quicker. And I thought, if I don't do a change now, I never will. And I'd always noticed there was a huge amount of tourists coming to this area, and nowhere for them to stay. And when I was 23, I did something which changed my life forever. It was very unknown for a hill farmer to do. I took up skiing. I took up skiing because I couldn't afford I wanted a Mini Cooper S rally car. I couldn't quite stretch to that, so I decided to take up skiing. That changed my life. It opened my eyes, it opened my mind. I always liked speed and excitement, and I started skiing when I was 23, and by the time I was 28, I had skied in the World Speed Skiing Championships in France at 105 miles an hour it was then. I did go faster later. But I met some wonderful people through that. People who, like most Wigwam people, see the bigger picture. One of the guys I met was a New Zealander called Henry Van Ash. Henry Van Ash and his friends were jumping off a bridge, and nobody wondered what on earth they were up to. But they were the guys that started the bungee jumping craze. Henry Van Ash and his friend A.J. Hackett. I met some Germans that came to visit me in 1989, and they brought these two unusual bikes out the back of his van made by an Austrian ski company called Kessler, and these were some of the very first mountain bikes. So all these things in life make you realise, and certainly made me realise, that there was other ways that you could utilise land without necessarily being in a livestock dependent situation. And when foot and mouth came along, although I wasn't affected by it directly, it did make me realise how vulnerable I felt as a farmer, and I did feel like a pawn in a game of politics. I felt the pride had gone out livestock farming. I felt that we were getting arrows fired at us from every angle because everything we seemed to do was wrong. And we went from being quite proud selling our livestock to suddenly going to an auction market, standing in the middle of the ring, surrounded with buyers that knew exactly how much they could spend because they'd all been on the mobile phone to each other to see what prices were making in other markets. And I felt like a defeated gladiator in the ring, looking up at the auctioneer. Is it thumbs up or thumbs down? But I've always realised that we stay in a unique area, and that we're very, very lucky to do so, being a native to this area. So anyway, I left the family farm, not quite sure what I was doing. I did initially think about moving abroad and maybe getting a small place in France or the Swiss Alps and doing something different. Looked into it, and spent a lot of time abroad weighing up the situation. And this old saying kept appearing in neon lights in front of me: an apple never falls far from the tree. Much as it's nice to visit other countries, when you looked into the technicalities, school for the children, tax implications, etc., it made it quite, not impossible, but difficult, certainly with a young family coming on whose education was of paramount importance. But one thing that was stuck in my mind is, with having a young family, I just didn't personally think having to walk 50, 100 yards at night to use a toilet and shower was what we would want. You're cleaning issues and other things which I didn't think would be very pleasant. But I was sold on the Wigwam idea because I liked the concept. I liked the fact it was a group. I liked the fact that people shared ideas. And my first impressions, which again I always go on, when I went to the first Wigwam conference in 2011, was every person in that room was someone you could sit down and have a cup of coffee or a pint with, but they were all people that had seen the bigger picture, and instead of sitting about complaining, were taking charge of their own destiny. And when you think about it in life, very few people are in charge of their own destiny. And I just thought, what a varied, interesting mixture of people, mostly from agricultural backgrounds, although there are other ones, but mostly from agriculture. But they were all people that had seen the bigger picture. And, well, as you can imagine, planning permission is a horrendous experience.
Can I ask, what do you think, what was the bigger picture for you? What was the bigger picture?
The bigger picture was to have a business which...
Was the diversification that you
well,
feel was the bigger picture?
We didn't buy this as a viable farm. We bought it because we wanted to do something different. Mm-hmm. And I've always, getting back to the start, thought that tourism is the future.
Right.
You know, quality tourism in a beautiful area.
The future for farming, or just...
Well, for ourselves. I mean, it might not suit everyone. You know, a lot of people, probably 80% of farmers, don't own their own farm. They're in tenancies, which are very tenuous. And, you know, they're struggling. They really are struggling.
Is that something that you've kind of, in your life, have seen, like a decline in like money that farmers can make, or?
There's I've seen the shepherds disappear because they couldn't keep them. When quad bikes came along, the shepherds disappeared. People in tenanted farms who had lifelong tenancies suddenly weren't able to get secure tenancies because there's a bit of fear of right to buy. So, you know, a lot of the big landed estates are scared to give long-term tenancies in case they lose their land. There's huge pressure from forestry to buy hill land for planting because there's a shortage of timber. Over the last 2 years, the price of land, hill farms, has risen to £2,000 an acre. It takes about 2 or 3 acres to produce one lamb that may make £50. So any farmers who are retired or past retirement age who are thinking to sell, it's a no-brainer for them. You know, forestry buy the farms, the houses are sold off, people move out into the area to retire or whatever. So the community is dying. The Wigwam company, like any other business, has to change with times, and what started out as basic accommodation for people hill walking in the West Highland Way was evolving into something slightly more glamorous, and people's expectations were going to get higher. And what swayed me, you know, like everything, you have to take your time before you move to the next stage because it is a huge risk. I mean, financially this cost a third more than ever expected to. That's the way it is. But anyway, kept in touch with Charles, and he told me that a gentleman called James Good had started a site at Brampton, which is with ensuite. So I phoned Charles and said I'd like to visit him and put me in touch with James. And went down to see what James had done on the Brampton site, and I was, any doubts, any fears, any, I'm trying to think of the correct word, any apprehensions I had were quite quickly, I could see that this was the way ahead. The way they'd set them out with the decking on the front, the ensuite, the distance apart. So I decided then that was the way to go ahead. So I had some rental flats in Edinburgh, which I'd taken as my share of leaving the farm, and I sold them. And I thought, you know, if each wigwam can make the same amount of money as a rental flat in a city, then you're in charge of the situation, you're on site, you know, you're there, you're doing something interesting, you know, something constructive. So James was a great help. I was able to take my builder down, plumber down, various other people, and to see what had been done there, so that, you know, from a technical point of view, we could look into the implications of doing it. What attracted us also to Wigwams was then you brought out the idea of doing a franchise site. Of course, again, that was something I was slightly worried about. So we've got a 12.5-mile radius in each direction, which means that nobody else can do wigwams.
So it was a concern for you before the franchise that
well,
they would come and...
it was a concern, Morgan, because there's quite a few camping facilities within 10 miles of this. There's quite a lot. And there was 1 or 2 private farms that came on the market. And, you know, I thought, you know, it's a matter of time before some of these bigger companies buy a farm, have mountain bikes, pony trekking, clay pigeon shooting, etc., etc., etc. So I thought, you know, it was very important for us to protect what we'd done. You know, I thought, we could have went to all the effort to do this, and somebody else could have jumped on the bandwagon and maybe done it bigger or maybe differently to us. So that was quite important. It's also very important in this modern day and age where everybody communicates by email. I was once asked to send somebody an email, and I replied that I couldn't even understand a female, never mind an email. So to me, it's very important to be able to pick up a telephone and speak to somebody. And, a problem shared is a problem halved, and we've got that.
So the support was another...
Absolutely. It's a national company. I think it could, I personally think it could do very well in continental Europe, and I've never been to New Zealand, but I could imagine Wigwams would fit into a place like New Zealand or bits of the Canadian Rockies. I really think the potential is far-reaching.
And so what other options did you look at? Or was it...
I just thought about log cabins. I thought log cabins, but, how the hell would you start advertising? That's a huge thing people don't think. How do you promote it? You could have, as I said to someone, you could build Disneyland here with all its attractions, but if nobody knew about it, they wouldn't come. So that, and we were straight, as soon as we were ready to open, we were straight into business. Whereas if we'd been trying to do it on our own, where would you have started advertising? How would you have went about it? How would you, I'm a great believer in life. We've all got skills. And it's very, very important to know your own skills and your own strengths. But we've all got weaknesses. And the most important thing to do is to identify your weakness. And when you do have a weakness, ask for help and get the best professional help you can get. I can drive a car. I can drive a tractor. I can ride a motorbike. I used to be a rally driver. But if something went wrong with that car or machine, I would know what was wrong with it. But I don't have the skills or tools to fix it myself. So then you take help. So it is very, very important to ask for help. And don't be scared, because none of us know everything. And that's why I like the franchise idea. And you meet some wonderful people. You meet some unusual people. You meet some people you don't want to meet. And you meet some people that you feel like you've known forever. It's a culture shock. It's a change. But most people are enjoying it. I think people this year are certainly more appreciative of the fact that they've got somewhere they can go.
Is that something, because I can imagine farming could be quite isolating.
I've said to many people over the years, and a lot of people don't realise this, but a farm gate could be like a prison gate. Especially nowadays when there's less and less people working on the land, there's not the social interaction for people.
And so is that something that you get out of having a Wigwam franchise?
Oh, I could talk forever more to some of these people. Yes, it is very sociable. It is very. Sometimes, just before we sat down for the conference, the phone rang twice. People want to pay the remainder of the deposits. But that's it. You must treat people with respect. You've got to do that. I mean, this is a big thing for some people. To come here for 2 or 3 days, it's probably one of the highlights of the year. And for them to share, and most people, sorry, I'm detracting. Most people just want to switch off. Mum and dad are working, kids are at school, they're not spending time together. They're always in a rush. And I think in a way we're kind of got to go back to maybe more basic values where people appreciate the things that are really important. Certainly this C19 thing has raised it.
In the planning phase, what was the most...
Trying to convince the planning people what we were trying to do. They didn't know.
Planning,
yeah, absolutely. They were... You can't put up a camping site. It's not a camping site. It's in an area of outstanding beauty. You can't do anything there. I said, well, the reason it's in an area of outstanding beauty is why we want to do something here. I said, tourists are coming here. I said, there's nowhere for them to stay. I think it's something to do well. We had people who had moved, and this really annoyed me. One chap bought a house not far from us. He'd been there for 6 weeks. He'd moved here to retire from Harrogate. We were at the final stages of getting planning permission. He wrote a 3-page letter of complaint: noise, litter, odour, pollution, spoiling the views. And that quite annoyed me, because I thought, they're coming here with their index-linked pensions. and they're quite happy to walk about, go jogging, walk their dog, enjoy the views and the scenery, but they've never herded the hills or built the walls or ploughed the fields. And I found that quite intimidating, because people like us that are indigenous to these areas, I can trace my family back to Roman times. I think they came over from Denmark as mercenaries with the Romans. Indigenous people, we're trying to adapt and change and stay in an area that we've spent generations in, and you have to change. And it annoyed me that people like that, they come to areas and they try and stop. They came in with their index-linked pension, yet they don't want people to adapt to modern times and stay in this area. And I think tourism has got a huge way to go. Planning permission, it took a long time, but like anything, it takes a long time. You just have to make sure you've done it right.